Mommy!
I heard my 3-year-old daughter call out to me, but I couldn't go to her. I heard my 5-month-old crying in his crib, but I couldn't go to him. Nausea hit me like a train, and I vomited. I wiped the vomit from my lips, flushed the toilet, and tried to stand up. I was pregnant with my 3rd child. 9 out of 10 pregnant women suffer from morning sickness, but I knew this wasn't typical morning sickness. The nausea wasn't just bad, it was horrible, and it was constant. This was Hyperemesis Gravidarum, or HG. I suffered through HG with my previous 2 pregnancies. What would we do now that it was happening a 3rd time? My husband and I just bought a house. He had a stable job, though he worked long hours, and we had 2 wonderful children. When we found out I was pregnant again, our emotions were all over the place. We were excited to have another baby, but worried about life with 3 kids, space in our house, finances, stress levels, time with our kids and each other. How would I take care of my children if HG made me sick all the time? How would my husband go to work if he had to take care of me? Despite the difficulties we knew we'd face, we decided to tough it out. When I was pregnant with my first 2 children, HG turned me into a zombie. So I thought I knew what to expect with this pregnancy. I lost 5% of my body weight in just a few weeks. I struggled to eat. Everything seemed to make me nauseous. Certain foods and smells made me throw up, so I didn't even allow them in the house at all. Because nothing stayed in my stomach long enough to be digested, my body wasn't getting the nutrients it needed. I was having a hard time getting out of bed. I could barely move to play with my daughter. Changing my son's diaper took all my energy. Eventually, my mother had to come to live with us and help me out. Around week 7 of my pregnancy, things went bad. I couldn't eat or drink without vomiting. I literally could not keep food or drink down. I couldn't do anything for myself. I felt miserable. I couldn't even care for my own children, and I cried every day because I felt like a failure as a mother. Not only my living children, but for the fetus growing inside me. It got so bad that my mom forced me to go to the hospital. With my 2 other pregnancies, I was hospitalized, but this time was much worse. In the other instances, doctors hooked me up to IVs to help with the nausea and replenish my fluids. This time, it wasn't as simple as needing fluids. Dehydration damaged my kidneys. Staying hydrated felt almost impossible. My kidneys weren't getting the salt and water they needed to function. If my kidneys failed, I could die. I took all kinds of pills, but even these didn't help too much because the doctors didn't want to prescribe any medications that might affect my baby. Doctors put an IV in my neck for fluids and inserted a feeding tube for nutrition. But that's not the worst part. The worst part was knowing that despite how I felt, if I wasn't getting the nutrients I needed, then my baby wasn't getting what it needed to grow. My husband and I contemplated having an abortion. Aborting the baby would immediately stop the nausea and pain. And 1 in every 7 women with HG choose abortion. The doctors were really concerned about my condition. If I went home, I'd go home with IVs and other medical equipment, which meant I would need an in-home nurse. We couldn't afford to pay for a nurse and pay for childcare and pay our regular bills, especially since we just bought a new home and still had the cost of a new baby coming soon. And even if we could afford it all, that still didn't help with the pain I was in, and it didn't help the health of my baby. I knew I had to make a decision. Continue this pregnancy, risk my health and risk my baby's health on top of all the other problems, or terminate the pregnancy and save my life. I chose to have an abortion. "How could you?" my mother said. She and my father were religious. "There are other options, aren't there?" my father said. Asking questions was his way of talking me out of it. Some friends said similar things as my parents. What angered me the most wasn't that people disagreed, but that they didn't understand. My choice was a rare choice, but one I needed to make. And everyone seemed to accuse me with lines like, "Just because it's expensive," or "But you'll spend time with your kids later," or "You'll feel better soon enough." Everyone seemed to think I made my choice based on just one thing. But it wasn't just one factor. It wasn't even 2 or 3. It was more like 4 or 5 reasons all wrapped up together. They also seemed to think that I didn't feel sad. I felt horrible. They seemed to think I was completely determined to have an abortion. I changed my mind several times a day. They seemed to think I was acting carelessly. It was my own child in my own womb. My husband understood and agreed. He saw how much pain I was in, both physically and emotionally.
He knew it was the best choice.
The procedure was quick, and I was in recovery before I knew it. I felt so much relief. I was not sick. I had an appetite. I regained my energy. On the way home from the procedure, I wondered if I would ever regret it. After the relief of the pain became normality, would I feel so awful for the choice I made? It's been 2 years, and I do not regret my decision. I love my 2 kids and my husband. They are my world. We're still happy and stable. I love my life. I do still wonder what life would have been like if I gave birth to a 3rd child. But then I wonder if I would have even survived. What would months of pain and nausea have been like? What would have happened if I left my children motherless and my husband alone? I made a choice. It was a difficult choice. It was a controversial choice. But in the end, I know it's the right choice.